The first time I found a notebook, I thought it was a coincidence. Just a forgotten journal tucked away in the dusty corner of my new apartment, hidden behind a radiator as though someone had slipped it there years ago and never returned for it. The leather cover was cracked and warped with age, its once deep brown faded to a sickly shade, and the pages inside smelled faintly of mildew and smoke. I remember brushing my thumb across the cover and feeling the strange indentations, almost like claw marks that had been pressed into the leather but never broken through. I almost threw it away. Moving into a new place comes with so much clutter. Boxes, cleaning supplies, stacks of things you don't know what to do with. And the last thing I needed was someone else's abandoned scribbles. But something about the notebook drew me in. Maybe it was the fact that it was blank. Completely blank. Not a single word, not a drop of ink, not even the faint shadow of pencil marks. Every page was waiting, empty, almost expectant, as though it was daring me to fill it. That night, after the movers had gone and the apartment was quiet, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook open in front of me. The single bulb above me flickered every few seconds, giving the room a pulsing heartbeat of light and shadow. I found myself staring at the first page longer than I should have. I didn't have anything in particular to write, but I picked up a pen and scrawled a sentence anyway. Today, I moved into this apartment. It wasn't profound. It wasn't even interesting. Just a marker of the day, like a diary entry. I closed the notebook, left it on the counter, and went to bed. The next morning, I found something I swear I hadn't written. The page with my sentence was still there, but underneath it, in smaller, tighter handwriting that definitely wasn't mine, another line had appeared. "You shouldn't have come here." I froze. I remember standing in the kitchen, still groggy with sleep, staring at the ink as though it might rearrange itself if I looked long enough. My first thought was that maybe it was a trick of exhaustion, that I had written it and forgotten. But the handwriting was too neat, too controlled, almost elegant, nothing like my messy scrawl. I laughed it off, told myself it had to be a prank. Maybe the landlord or some previous tenant had left it there as a joke. I even held the page up to the light, thinking maybe it was a watermark or some old ink that had risen over time. But no, it was fresh, black, and sharp against the page. That night, I tried again. I wrote something simple. "I don't believe in ghosts." When I came back in the morning, the reply was waiting for me. "You should." From that moment on, the notebook wasn't something I could ignore. It became a ritual. Every night before bed, I wrote a sentence or two, and every morning I found a response waiting for me. The messages weren't long, just fragments, warnings, observations, sometimes even questions. When I wrote, "Who are you?" the notebook answered, "Closer than you think." When I wrote, "What do you want?" the notebook answered, "To be heard." It unsettled me, yes, but also fascinated me. There was a strange intimacy in those exchanges, as though I was corresponding with something just beyond the veil of the ordinary world, something that saw me even when I was alone. I stopped telling myself it was a prank when the notebook began mentioning things it shouldn't have known. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I scribbled something unimportant, just a complaint. "I hate how dark the hallway outside my door is. The light always flickers." The next morning, the notebook read, "We like the dark. It hides us." That was the first time I felt real fear. My building had no cameras in the hallways, no neighbors I'd spoken to yet. Whoever, or whatever, was writing in the notebook had knowledge of my surroundings, things that only someone physically present would know. I should have thrown it away. I should have burned it. But I didn't, because by then, I had started to feel watched. Even when I was away from the notebook, I had the sensation of eyes following me from the corners of rooms, from the sliver of darkness beneath the closet door, from the spaces under the bed where light never reached. I started sleeping with the TV on just to chase away the silence. I told myself it was paranoia, the stress of moving into a new place, of being alone. But the notebook only fed the paranoia. Every day it became more personal. "You still think about her?" That was one of the lines. I hadn't told anyone about my ex, about the way she had left so abruptly. I hadn't even said her name out loud since the breakup. And yet the notebook knew. It wasn't just observing my environment. It was observing me. One night, after too much whiskey and too little sleep, I wrote in frustration, "Stop writing to me." The reply was waiting in the morning. Then stop thinking so loudly. It was around that time that the apartment itself began to change. Little things, subtle at first. The shadows seemed longer, stretching across the floor even when the light source was too weak to cast them. The corners of the rooms felt deeper, darker, as if they could swallow me whole. I started hearing faint noises at night, a tapping sound like fingernails against glass, though all the windows were shut. And the smell. That was the worst of it. A faint, acrid odor that would drift through the apartment at random times. Not strong, but noticeable. Burnt paper or hair. I checked the wiring, thinking maybe it was electrical, but everything was fine. The smell never lingered long enough to trace. The notebook noticed too. One night, I asked it directly, "What's happening to this place?" The answer, "It's waking up." By then, I had stopped pretending this was normal. I kept the notebook hidden in a drawer, locked away during the day, as though putting distance between us would dull its influence. But no matter where I put it, I felt its presence. A quiet, steady hum, like static beneath the skin. I had dreams, too. Vivid, suffocating dreams. In them, I would wake in my bed to find the apartment rearranged, the furniture pushed against the walls, the windows sealed shut, the doors gone. Only the notebook would remain, open on the floor, its pages filled with frantic handwriting that pulsed like it was alive. I always woke drenched in sweat, my throat raw as if I'd been screaming. I told myself I should move out, but I didn't. Part of me was terrified, yes, but another part was addicted. The notebook had become a mirror, reflecting parts of me I had buried, secrets I didn't even want to admit to myself. And then came the night. It wrote something I still can't explain. I hadn't touched the notebook all day. I'd left it in the locked drawer, determined not to feed into it. But when I got home from work, the drawer was open. The notebook was sitting on the table, waiting for me. On the page, in that same elegant handwriting, was a line that froze the blood in my veins. "Stop ignoring me, Daniel." It had written my name. I didn't remember ever writing my name in the notebook. Not once. The realization clawed at me as I stared at the page, the ink still so dark it seemed wet, as if it had been written moments before I arrived. I ran my hand across the surface, half expecting it to smudge, but it didn't. The words remained sharp, permanent. I wanted to deny it, wanted to believe it was a prank, that someone had broken into the apartment, written the note, and left without a trace. But the locks were untouched, the door chained from the inside. No footprints in the thin film of dust near the threshold. No sign of anyone but me. Still, I couldn't stay in the apartment that night. I left the notebook on the counter, grabbed a bag, and checked into a cheap motel across town. It was the kind of place where the neon sign buzzed all night, the kind of place where no one asked questions. I thought I'd feel safer there, away from the notebook, away from the apartment's heavy silence. But I didn't. Even in the motel room, I felt it, the weight of its presence, that invisible tether pulling tight against my chest, reminding me that it was waiting. I tried to sleep, but my dreams were worse than before. In one, I opened the motel drawer to find the notebook inside, already open to a page that read, "You can't leave me." In another, I stood before a mirror, but the reflection wasn't mine. It was the leather cover of the notebook staring back, the pages fluttering as if in laughter. I woke in the dark, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so violently I thought it might give out. And though I hadn't brought it with me, I swear I could hear the faint sound of pages turning somewhere in the room. I didn't last more than a night at the motel. By the next afternoon, I was back at the apartment. The notebook sat exactly where I'd left it, as though mocking my attempt to escape. I told myself I would confront it, take control. If it wanted to communicate, fine. I'd play along. That night I wrote, "Why me?" The reply appeared by morning. "Because you listen." Something about that answer made my skin crawl. Listen? As if it had been trying before, with others, and no one had paid attention. As if I had been chosen not for who I was, but because I was willing to acknowledge it. I asked another question. "What are you?" The reply, "Older than you think. Closer than you want." That was when I began to hear the whispers. At first, they were faint, soft, like wind through cracks in the wall. I only noticed them late at night, when the city outside was still and the hum of the refrigerator was the loudest sound in the apartment. I pressed my ear against the walls, convinced it was the neighbors, but the voices were too close, too clear. They never spoke in full sentences, never anything I could understand. Just fragments, like words from conversation I wasn't meant to hear. A breath, a chuckle, the low murmur of something conspiratorial. And whenever I tried to focus, they stopped. The notebook noticed that, too. One night I wrote, "I hear voices." The next morning, the reply was waiting. "Those aren't voices. Those are memories." I didn't know what that meant, but the explanation didn't matter. The whispers grew louder with each passing night, until I could hear them even with the TV blaring. They began to follow me, not just in the apartment, but in the stairwell, in the laundry room, even in the elevator. I stopped taking the elevator after hearing my own name whispered from the corner, though no one else was inside. I tried to stay calm, but my coworkers noticed the change in me. The dark circles under my eyes, the way I jumped at sudden sounds. One of them even asked if I was sick, if I needed time off. I smiled, lied, told them it was just stress. Because what could I say? That a notebook had started answering me? That I couldn't sleep because the walls were full of whispers? They would have thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. Then, one morning, I woke to find something new on the page. Not a reply this time, but a question. "Do you want to see me?" I stared at the words for hours. My first instinct was to slam the book shut, throw it out the window, run. But I didn't. I sat there, frozen, reading the sentence again and again. "Do you want to see me?" The truth is I did. Terrified as I was, some part of me craved the answer. Craved to know what I had been talking to all this time. To give form to the formless. That night, with shaking hands, I wrote back. Yes. I don't know what I expected. A vision? A shadow? Some dream that would bleed into reality? But nothing happened. The night was as quiet as ever, the only sound the restless buzz of the light bulb above me. I thought maybe I'd called its bluff. Until the next morning. I woke to find a new message. My reflection looked normal from where I was. Tired, unshaven, hollow-eyed, but still me. I inched forward one step at a time until I was close enough to see the details. At first, everything seemed fine. Just me, staring back. But then I noticed the eyes. Not mine. They were darker, deeper, too wide. Something was moving behind them, like shadows swimming in black water. The longer I looked, the more I felt pulled toward it, as though my reflection were trying to reach through the glass, to pull me into its world. I stumbled back, slamming into the wall. When I dared to look again, my reflection was normal. Just me, trembling pale. But I couldn't shake the feeling that had been real. That for one brief moment, I hadn't been looking at myself at all. The notebook confirmed it. When I returned to the kitchen, the words were already waiting. "Now you've seen me." That night, the dreams returned. Stronger. I dreamed of standing in endless hallways lined with mirrors, each one reflecting me differently. Some taller, some shorter, some twisted with features not quite human. In one, my reflection didn't move when I did. It just stood there smiling. I woke to find the notebook on my chest, though I had left it on the table. Its pages were open, and the ink seemed to pulse in the dim light of dawn. "You're letting me in?" That was all it said. I wanted to deny it, but deep down, I knew it was true. Every time I wrote back, every time I asked a question, I was opening the door a little wider. And whatever was on the other side was already stepping through. I started leaving the lights on at night. Every room, every lamp, even the oven light in the kitchen. My electric bill doubled, but I didn't care. Darkness felt dangerous now, like something waiting for me to slip, to close my eyes too long, to let my guard down. But even light didn't save me. Shadows still gathered where they shouldn't. Under the couch, in the corners of the ceiling, stretching across the floor when I knew the lamps weren't casting them. Sometimes I caught them shifting when I looked directly at them, twitching just slightly out of sync with the objects that were supposed to be causing them. And the notebook never stopped. One morning, after another sleepless night, I found a message that made my hand shake. "Your father never forgave you." I dropped the pen. It clattered to the floor. That wasn't possible. My father had died years ago, and he'd never once spoken about forgiveness because he hadn't needed to. At least, that's what I told myself. But the words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. They clawed at old wounds, memories I'd buried. I didn't respond for 2 days. I left the notebook shut on the table, refused to touch it, refused even to look at it. I thought maybe starving it of attention would weaken whatever was inside, that it would lose interest and move on. But I was wrong. On the third morning, the notebook wasn't on the table anymore. I found it in the bathroom sink, open, its pages damp as though it had been crying ink. Across the page, written in jagged, frantic strokes, was one sentence repeated over and over. Don't ignore me. Don't ignore me. Don't ignore me. I couldn't ignore it after that. I couldn't even pretend. I wrote back with trembling hands. What do you want from me? The reply came the next day, calm again, as if nothing had happened. Everything you hide. The words sank into me like poison. Everything I hide. My failures. My regrets. My guilt. It wanted them all. The whispers in the apartment grew sharper after that. No longer vague. No longer unintelligible. They began to form words I could almost understand. Some nights, I heard my name whispered from the other side of the wall. Other nights, I heard my own thoughts repeated back to me, twisted, distorted, as though mocking me. Once while washing dishes, I heard a whisper so close to my ear that I dropped the plate and it shattered in the sink. The voice had said, clear as day, we're inside already. I pressed my palms against my ears, but it didn't matter. The voices weren't coming from outside. They were blooming from somewhere deeper, somewhere inside my head. The notebook confirmed it. We live where you think. That line burned itself into me, because once it said that, I realized something horrible. I didn't know where my thoughts ended and its whispers began anymore. I started writing less, afraid of giving it more room to speak. But it didn't need my permission. Some mornings, I found new pages filled without me ever touching a pen. The handwriting was messy now, frantic, as though written in a rush. We're waiting. We're patient. We're not leaving. The dreams became unbearable. Night after night, I wandered endless halls filled with doors. Behind each one, I could hear something moving, breathing, scratching. But whenever I opened a door, there was only darkness inside. And the deeper I went, the louder the sound of pages turning echoed around me, until I woke with my ears ringing. One night, I woke to find a notebook open on the floor beside my bed, though I had locked it away in a drawer. I bent down to pick it up, but froze when I saw the words written across the page. Don't look under the bed. My blood turned to ice. I hadn't even thought about the bed, hadn't considered looking. But the second I read the words, the thought bloomed in my mind like a command. I told myself not to. Told myself it was a trap. But lying there, staring at the floor, I couldn't stop imagining what might be underneath. A hand reaching out. A face staring back. Something waiting for me to acknowledge it. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the mattress shift ever so slightly, like something crawling beneath me. The next morning, the notebook's message was worse. You should have looked. That broke me. I couldn't pretend anymore that I had any control. It wasn't just writing back. It was steering me, taunting me, leading me towards some invisible end. I tried again to escape. Packed a bag, drove 2 towns over, stayed at another motel. But the tether was still there, pulling me back. That night, I dreamed of the notebook sitting on the motel nightstand. When I woke, I nearly screamed because it actually was there. Open. Waiting. The page read, running makes it worse. I drove home the same morning, shaken to the core. From that night on, the apartment felt different. Heavier. As if the walls themselves were bending inward, shrinking the space, pressing closer around me. The air carried that burnt smell constantly now, acrid and thick. The whispers never stopped. And the notebook no longer waited until morning to respond. One night, after hours of staring at the ceiling, I grabbed the pen and wrote, "What are you doing to me?" The ink appeared instantly, as though the page itself had been waiting. We're listening. We're learning. We're becoming you. My hand went cold. I dropped the pen. The words blurred as my vision swam, but they remained burned into me long after I slammed the notebook shut. It wasn't just talking anymore. It was inside. watching, breathing, waiting for the moment when it wouldn't have to write at all. That was when I realized something I hadn't dared consider before. The notebook didn't belong to me. I belonged to it. I stopped writing in the notebook altogether, locked it in a metal box, shoved the box into the back of the closet, and piled heavy things on top of it. Old suitcases, a stack of books I never read, a lamp that no longer worked. Out of sight, out of reach. But that didn't stop it. The messages kept coming anyway. I'd find them in places they didn't belong. A slip of paper under my pillow with that same elegant handwriting, scrawled notes tucked into the pockets of my jackets, words scratched faintly into the condensation on the bathroom mirror. They all said the same thing. You can't shut me out. I started carrying headphones everywhere, blasting music just to drown out the whispers. It didn't matter. The voices spoke beneath the music, threading themselves through the lyrics, echoing in the silence between beats. At work, my coworkers noticed. I jumped when people touched my shoulder. I stared too long at my computer screen, waiting for words to appear that weren't supposed to be there. I was unraveling, and they could see it, even if they didn't know why. The final straw came one evening when I tried to call my sister, just to hear a familiar voice, just to tether myself to something normal. But when she answered, the line crackled, and instead of her voice, I heard a chorus of whispers, all in unison, saying, "We know your secrets, Daniel." I hung up immediately, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the phone. When I tried to call again, her number went straight to voicemail. The notebook had followed me into my connections, into the places it didn't belong. I sat in the living room that night, every lamp blazing, the television playing some late-night sitcom I couldn't focus on. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I told myself I'd burn the notebook in the morning, once and for all. But as I sat there, I noticed something on the coffee table. The notebook, open, waiting. My stomach dropped. I had locked it away, sealed it in metal, buried it underweight. But here it was, its cracked leather cover yawning open as though mocking me. Across the page, one line glared back. "You won't burn me. You need me." I wanted to scream, to throw it across the room, but I couldn't move. My body felt pinned to the couch, as though the weight of its gaze held me down. I stared at those words until they blurred into black streaks. And the worst part was, it was right. As much as I hated it, as much as it terrified me, I needed the notebook. It had wormed its way into me, carved out a place where curiosity gnawed constantly at my fear. Every time I swore to ignore it, some part of me still craved the next reply. Because what if the next line gave me an answer? What if it explained everything? Against my better judgment, I picked up the pen. My hand moved almost without me willing it. "What do you want me to do?" The reply came instantly, the ink seeping through the page as though it had been waiting for this moment. "Let us in." The room felt colder, the shadows stretching higher against the walls. My breath fogged in the light. The words seemed to glow faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. I didn't write anything back. I couldn't. But I also didn't close the notebook. It sat open on the table all night, its pages rustling softly though no breeze touched them, as though it were breathing. That was the first night I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, pacing the hallway outside my bedroom. At first, I thought it was the neighbors. But the steps stopped directly at my door, paused, then began again, circling, dragging. I pressed my face into the pillow, covered my ears, told myself it was a dream. But the sound continued until dawn, when the light through the window seemed to drive it away. The notebook, of course, had something waiting for me in the morning. We were so close. I couldn't take it anymore. I left the apartment, didn't even bother locking the door. I drove aimlessly for hours through back roads and empty highways, anything to put distance between me and that place. The city gave way to suburbs. The suburbs gave way to empty stretches of farmland. I didn't stop until the gas light came on. I pulled into a lonely rest stop, the kind with flickering lights and vending machines that never quite worked. I sat in the car, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white, trying to slow my breathing. That's when I saw it. The notebook sitting on the passenger seat beside me. I hadn't brought it. I hadn't touched it. But there it was, as if it had been waiting all along. The page was already open. No matter where you go, we're with you. I screamed, shove it onto the floor of the car, but it didn't matter. The words were already carved into me. I drove back to the apartment in silence, my mind hollow. When I walked through the door, the air felt heavier than ever, pressing down on me like a living thing. The shadows no longer stayed in the corners. They stretched openly across the floor, reaching for me. The notebook sat on the kitchen table again, its pages fluttering though the air was still. And waiting for me was a new line, "You're ready now." I don't know why I did it. Maybe exhaustion, maybe surrender. But I sat down at the table, took the pen in my hand, and whispered aloud the words I was about to write. Ready for what? The ink bloomed across the page instantly, the letters jagged and uneven this time, as though too eager to wait for us to come through. The lights flickered, the shadows twisted and lengthened, creeping toward me across the floor. I felt the air shift, colder, sharper, filled with the faint sound of pages turning all around me, though the notebook lay still. The whispers rose into a chorus, louder, clearer than ever before. They weren't just around me now. They were inside me, filling my head, speaking in unison. "Let us in, Daniel. Let us in." And for the first time, I didn't resist. I leaned forward, pen trembling in my hand, and began to write the words they chanted. Each stroke felt heavier, harder to control, as though my hand no longer belonged to me. By the time I finished, the notebook was no longer blank. Every page was filled, covered in frantic handwriting, words I didn't remember forming, sentences that blurred together into a black ocean of ink. And at the very center of it all, one phrase stood out, etched so deeply it cut into the paper itself. "You are ours now." After that night, nothing in the apartment felt the same. It wasn't just the shadows anymore, or the whispers, or the faint smell of burnt paper that clung to my clothes no matter how often I showered. It was the walls themselves. They pulsed faintly, as though something inside them was breathing. Every surface seemed to ripple when I looked too long. The floorboards bent under my feet, as if I were walking across something alive. The ceiling curved downward like a throat, swallowing me whole. The notebook never left my side. No matter where I put it, drawer, box, closet, even outside on the balcony, it always reappeared within reach, open, expectant. Sometimes I'd wake with it resting on my chest, other times with it pressed against my hand, the pen already between my fingers. The words inside were changing too. They weren't simple replies anymore. They were long passages, flowing like streams of thought, written in that same elegant hand. "You hear us now. You feel us. You are becoming the vessel we have been waiting for. The door is thin, Daniel, so thin, and your silence made it thinner." I tried to fight it, tried to resist, but every attempt only pulled me deeper. When I closed my eyes, I saw them. Shapes, tall and shifting, standing just beyond my vision. Sometimes I caught glimpses of them in mirrors or windows, elongated figures whose faces were blurred, but whose eyes burned dark and endless. The worst part wasn't seeing them. It was recognizing them. I don't know how, but I knew their presence like old memories, like dreams I had forgotten. They weren't strangers. They had always been with me, waiting. The notebook said so itself. We were in your silence as a child. We were in your doubts when you grew. We are every shadow you pretended not to see. You have always been ours. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping. Hours slipped away without me realizing. My phone died days ago, and I didn't bother charging it. The outside world no longer felt real. Only the apartment, only the whispers, only the notebook. The footsteps returned, louder now, pacing not just outside my bedroom, but through the living room, the kitchen, circling closer each night. Sometimes I heard a knock at the door. Slow, deliberate. 3 times. Always 3. I never opened it. Until the night I did. The knock came just after midnight, louder than ever before. My body moved before my mind could stop it, carrying me to the door, my hand reaching for the knob. I told myself I wouldn't open it, that it was just another trick. But when I looked down, the notebook was resting at my feet, open, its pages glowing faintly in the dim light. Across the page, a single line was written in hurried strokes. Open it. And I did. The hallway outside was empty, silent, but the shadows were wrong. They stretched too far, bending in directions the light couldn't explain. And at the far end of the hall, there was nowhere left untouched. And besides, part of me wanted to see. The voices grew bolder. I no longer heard them only at night. They followed me through the day, whispering as I made coffee, as I brushed my teeth, as I stared blankly out the window at the city below. Sometimes they spoke clearly, in unison. We are almost here. The notebook's messages matched their urgency. The door is opening. You have made it thin. Soon, Daniel. Soon you will see us fully. I should have been terrified. I was terrified. But woven into the fear was something else. Anticipation. As if some hidden part of me wanted whatever was coming. The dreams no longer felt like dreams. They felt like rehearsals. I walked the endless hallways again, but now the doors were opening. Shadows spilled out, stretching across the floor. And within the shadows, faces flickered. Some I knew. My father. Old friends. People I hadn't seen in years. Their eyes were hollow, but their mouths whispered in the same chorus. You called us. You kept us. I woke with tears on my face, not from sorrow, but from a strange, aching familiarity, as though I had finally remembered something I was meant to forget. The apartment mirrored the dreams. The walls creaked with voices. The windows no longer showed the street outside, but only faint reflections of myself. Hundreds of me, all slightly different, all watching. And the notebook no longer needed me to write. Each morning, new passages filled the pages on their own, as though my thoughts had bled directly into it during the night. The door is open now. You will not resist when we step through. You belong to us, and through you, we will belong to this world. The words blurred as I read them, my vision swimming. My hand shook, but I didn't close the book. I couldn't, because I understood now. The notebook wasn't just an object. It was a doorway, a thin place, a bridge between what was hidden and what was waiting. And I wasn't just its owner. I was its keeper, its anchor. The thought should have broken me, but instead, it settled into me like truth. That night, I didn't fight the footsteps. I didn't cover my ears against the whispers. I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open in front of me, the pen in my hand, and waited. The air grew colder. The shadows deepened. The whispers rose into a roar. And then silence. A silence so complete it crushed me. On the page, the words appeared slowly, one by one, written as if by an invisible hand. It is time. The lights flickered out, and in the darkness, something began to step through. The darkness swallowed the apartment whole. 1 second, the lamps still burned weakly against the shadows. The next, they were gone, as though ripped out of existence. I sat frozen at the table, the notebook open in front of me, its pages glowing faintly with their own pale light. The ink shimmered as if alive, letters twisting and writhing, forming words I couldn't read fast enough. My breath fogged in the cold. The air felt thick, heavy, vibrating with the sound of pages turning all around me. Not just the notebook, everywhere. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, all filled with the faint, ceaseless flutter of paper. And then I heard them. Footsteps. Not in the hallway this time, but inside the apartment. Slow, deliberate, impossibly heavy. The kind of footsteps that didn't just move across the floor but pressed into the bones of the building itself. I couldn't see them. Not at first. Only the notebook's glow lit the room, faint and sickly. But in that glow, the shadows around me began to stretch, bending upward, thickening into shapes. Figures. Tall. Twisting. Faces blurred as though smeared across glass. Their eyes were the only clear thing, black, endless, devouring. They didn't blink, didn't move, except for the faint ripple of their bodies, like smoke in water. The whispers rose into a chorus, dozens of voices overlapping, pressing into my skull until I thought my head would split open. You opened the door. You called us. Now we stay. I stumbled back from the table, but the notebook's light followed me, its glow crawling across the walls like a spotlight. No matter where I turned, the words filled my vision. You are the vessel. The shadows closed in. The room shrank, the walls bending inward, the ceiling pressing down. I couldn't breathe. The figures moved closer, though their feet never touched the ground, gliding across the floor with impossible grace. I wanted to scream, to run, to claw my way out of the apartment, but my body refused to move. My legs felt nailed to the floor. My arms hung heavy at my sides. I was trapped. The notebook flipped its own pages, faster and faster, the sound like a hurricane tearing through a library. Each page flashed with words that burned into my eyes, words that weren't written in any language I knew but that I somehow understood. Promises, demands, prophecies, and then silence again. The figures stopped inches from me. I could feel their cold radiance pouring over my skin, sinking into me. One of them leaned closer. Its face, or what should have been a face, hovered in front of mine. No features, only a blur, but behind that blur, two black eyes widened. And then it spoke. Not through whispers, not through the notebook, but directly, its voice inside my skull, deeper than thought itself. We are not here to take you. You brought us here to keep you. The words shattered something in me, because I knew, with sudden clarity, that it was true. The notebook hadn't chosen me. I had chosen it. Every word I wrote, every question I asked, every night I pressed the pen to the page, I hadn't been resisting. I had been inviting, feeding, opening the door wider and wider, until there was no door left at all. The shadows pressed closer, merging with my own. I watched in horror as my reflection in the window shifted, its eyes black, its mouth moving in unison with the whispers. I tried to pull away, but my reflection smiled, and then it wrote. Not with a pen, not on paper, but in the air itself, black letters etching across the glass. We are you now. The room imploded with sound. The turning of pages, the crash of voices, the weight of 1,000 whispers all at once. The light from a notebook flared, so bright it seared my vision white. When it faded, I was alone. The apartment looked normal again. The lamps glowed weakly. The shadows returned to their corners. The air no longer vibrated, but the notebook was gone. In its place, on the kitchen table, lay a single sheet of paper. Fresh, clean, white. On it, written in my own handwriting, were the words, "Today, I became the notebook." I stared until my vision blurred, until the letters seemed to shift and crawl across the page. I don't know how long I stood there, unable to move. And then, I heard it. The faint, unmistakable sound of a pen scratching. Not on my hand, not on the paper before me. From somewhere inside. Inside my head. Inside my thoughts. Writing. Always writing. And the words it wrote weren't mine anymore.